as Pakistan's Foreign Secretary and subsequently as Ambassador to Washington. He stood at the very front lines of diplomacy, navigating some of the most turbulent waters in South Asia's modern history. His previous work, Diplomatic Footprints, offered a rare insight into chronicles of diplomacy as experienced by a practitioner, candid, thoughtful, and deeply instructive. In this new volume of work, he turns his seasoned gaze to what is perhaps the most enduring and vexing relationship in the region, if not the world, that between Pakistan and India. This book is not simply a recounting of history. It is an insider's dissection of why, despite shared geography, intertwined cultures, and multiple peace initiatives, mistrust has proven so persistent and so intractable. Ambassador Chaudhry situates his analysis at the intersection of history, politics, and diplomacy. He lays bare how legacies of partition, the unresolved dispute of Jammu and Kashmir, cycles of war and failed peace, triggered by India's quest for regional dominance, and the shadow of terrorism that has wreaked havoc for Pakistan's security and development perspective, have entrenched hostility. At the same time, he examines the broader geopolitical context, from the Cold War to the US-China rivalry, showing how global currents have consistently washed onto South Asia's shores, amplifying tensions rather than diffusing them. What makes this work particularly valuable to the vantage point is the vantage point of the author himself. This is not the voice of an academic observing from afar, but of a diplomat who has sat across the table in moments of crisis and dialogue. His reflections are informed by lived experiences, by the hard choices, the near misses, and the fleeting windows of opportunity that only a practitioner can fully appreciate and comprehend. Ladies and gentlemen, yet this book is not merely diagnostic. It is prescriptive too. It challenges both nations to recognize the perils of perpetual confrontation and to explore avenues from trade and geoeconomics to people exchanges and cooperative security frameworks that might rehumanize a relationship long stripped of empathy. In doing so, Ambassador Chaudhry does not offer false optimism. Instead, he offers what might one call informed hope, the kind of hope that is tempered by history but not extinguished, the kind of hope that insists that geography need not condemn neighbors to hostility forever. At a time when South Asia finds itself again at an inflection point, with the recent confrontations exposing the dangers of escalation, this book is both timely and necessary. It is an invitation to scholars, policymakers, and students alike to revisit old assumptions, to examine uncomfortable truths, and to ask whether the next chapter of this relationship must be written in the same ink as the last. Ladies and gentlemen, what strikes me particularly while reading this book is how starkly it illustrates the asymmetry between how easy it has been for India and Pakistan to fall into conflict, and how extraordinarily difficult it has been for them to build peace. As one poet once put it, for war, no reason is ever required, but for peace, we search endlessly for reasons. This, to me, is the heart of the challenge. The structural disputes are real and often bitter, and India's quest for hegemony so stark and sustained, but so too is the absence of imagination. The ability to envision a relationship not defined solely by guile or grievance. Ambassador Chaudhry reminds us that the act of rehumanizing the other is itself a form of strategic thinking. It is not sentimentality. In the nuclear age, it is a survival imperative. Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry has given us not only an authentic work on a subject of great import, but a framework for reflection, a map drawn from both scholarship and statecraft. In that sense, Pakistan-India relations, fractured past, uncertain future, is more than a chronicle of an enduring acrimony or grievances. It is a guide to possibilities. It reminds me of a couplet, तुम आए हो न शबे इंतजार गुजरी है, तलाश में है सहर बार बार गुजरी है. Peace in South Asia, home to a quarter of humanity, has always been elusive in the face of India's intransigence and obduracy. But let's hope, ladies and gentlemen, that the past and present does not define the future. It is my honor to commend this work to you and to welcome the accomplished author who has so ably combined the pen of a scholar with the wisdom of a discerning diplomat. I thank you all.
So this book is an attempt to answer this very question. Personally, I've had the opportunity to be associated with Pakistan-India peace processes at least 3 times in my career. In 1997 to 1999 as Director of Foreign Secretary's Office, from 2007 to 2009 as Director General and later Additional Secretary for South Asia, and finally from 2013 to 2017 as Foreign Secretary. What I've discovered from this lifelong experience with Pakistan's India policy is that 2 issues have nearly always impeded any progress towards peace. The first is Jammu and Kashmir dispute, which sits at the very heart of bilateral tensions. The 3rd chapter of the book before you looks at the factors that have contributed to the intractability of this dispute. India's resistance to implement the United Nations Security Council resolutions, abrogation of Kashmir's statehood in 2019, demographic and electoral engineering currently underway in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and the use of excessive force to suppress the Kashmiris' freedom struggle. Khurram Dastagir Sahab has rightly and often described the Indian occupied Kashmir as the most militarized zone of the world. Am I right, sir? I've also explored whether there can be a solution with which all parties, Pakistan, India, China, yes, I include that in that, Kashmiris and international community can live with. The second issue pertains to terrorism that has affected both countries, more so Pakistan than India. India has consistently accused Pakistan of supporting what it calls cross-border terrorism. For its part, Pakistan has complaints that India has not only been sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan through proxies, but has also been carrying out target assassinations inside Pakistan. Who would know it better than General Amir Riaz, who was DGMO at a very, very difficult time of counterterrorism efforts, and who was later the commander of Southern Command and has seen it all. I've examined several terrorist incidents. Once you go through the book, you will find that took place in India, for which initially Pakistan was blamed, but later on it transpired that internal Indian elements were involved. The point here is that while the findings took many, many years to come out, damage had been caused to the reputation of Pakistan. While Kashmir and terrorism are issues that must be addressed, along with a host of others like trade, climate, cultural ties, etc., I also learned through my inquiry that an overarching obstacle to peace in the region is India's priority for strategic dominance of the region, or even the creation of a united India or Akhand Bharat. Now, this right-wing fantasy of a Hindu nation in the subcontinent was demonstrated by a mural map that was installed in the new building of the Indian Parliament some 2 years ago. In that context, it appears that Pakistan is viewed in India as the chief obstacle to this particular goal. This policy approach by India has taken a more aggressive form in the recent past, particularly in the last decade, where we saw kinetic aggressions against Pakistan in September 2016, February 2019, and most recently in May 2025. The 4-day war in May 2025 has profoundly impacted the strategic calculus of all powers involved in South Asia. I am sure you must have heard, if not read, of the book that Mr. Solanki has co-authored, The War That Changed Everything. The title says it all. This book also contains a chapter on the May 2025 standoff. The two countries are now in the phase of their relationship, which I term as cold silence and growing public hostility. Yet, as Ambassador Jawhar Salim mentioned very rightly, in the midst of this growing mutual hostility and mistrust, I believe there are enough good men and women in both countries who cherish peace based on mutual respect and shared prosperity. This book is for them. It is also for academics like Dr. Arshad Salim Hashmi, the many observers, students, researchers, and readers who wish to understand why one of the world's most important bilateral relationships oscillates between dialogue and deadlock. The first chapter of the book looks at how Muslim and Hindu nationalism emerged in the subcontinent, while the last chapter places on record considerable work already done over the years to forge peaceful and cooperative relations. The kind of agreements that we've signed, the confidence building measures, and a host of other measures that were adopted. Should there be a change of heart on the Indian side for peaceful relations with Pakistan, the ideas contained in the last chapter can provide a solid foundation. This book is not my memoir, and I think Ambassador Jawhar rightly alluded to that, or perhaps was it the moderator, I don't exactly recall. That was Diplomatic Footprints. But this book is not episodal. It is evidence-based research and draws heavily from insights of practitioners, diplomats, scholars, and analysts who have spent years studying and shaping this discourse. Some of them are actually sitting in this hall and also on this podium. I must also recognize Mubin Ahmed, my eldest son, who once again designed the cover of my book, as he did for Diplomatic Footprints, and my son Samir, who edited the book. He has a knack for doing so. I must also recognize here my publisher, Book Corner, which Ambassador Tariq Zamir introduced to me, who published in a record time and a high quality end product. Let me conclude with the words that appear in the preface. That road to peace is long and uneven, but it is not closed. The past may be fractured and the future may be uncertain, but between the two lies a fragile space where dialogue can still lead to something better. This book is my modest attempt and contribution in keeping that hope alive. Thank you very much once again for honoring us and for gracing this occasion. Thank you.
And there are a lot of good friends and people that I have learned many things in the past and hope I'll continue learning from them. It's truly a humbling experience for me to be invited to speak on this great book, Pakistan-India Relations, Fractured Past, Uncertain Future. If you look at the very cover of the book, you see two chairs vacant, nobody sitting on them, with a desk that has scattered white sheets of paper, nothing on them. On one hand, it looks like a half empty glass, but I share the optimism by Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who is probably an eternal optimist despite being an eyewitness to this seesaw actions of ups and downs in the history of relationship between both countries. As I was coming here this morning, I went through the speech of Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, delivered to the First Constituent Assembly on the same day, like today, Monday, August the 11th, 1947. In his speech, and I quote, he says this just 3 days before independence. He says, the whole world is wondering at this unprecedented cyclonic revolution which has brought about the plan of creating and establishing two independent sovereign dominions in the subcontinent. Thankfully, he didn't, talk about partition of India. He talked about establishment of two sovereign independent nations, because as much as some people under Modi mobocracy, the Hindutva-led, would still try to, sell us this bogey and failed concept of partition of India. It was basically creation of two independent sovereign nations. Since Jinnah Sahab himself talks about creation of two independent states out of subcontinent, not a country, India, that now the RSS people try to sell us. Ladies and gentlemen, as some of us who have the chance to go through this book, Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who has been and who is telling us this eyewitness account, since he has seen both those highs and lows. He does not just give us the diagnostics, the prognosis of the disease, but in this book, he also gives us the prescription of the healing. That's the great thing about this book. As we all know, that at times, proximity breeds contempt. And as we have seen over more than 7 decades, the relationship between Pakistan and India, somehow, sadly, it's the mistrust that has defined the relationship, not a constructive engagement as Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry has written in this book. And if you fast forward to just a few months back, the month of May, the Operation Pakistan named Bunyanun Marsus, that too reveals a reminder about the cost of conflict, which can't be measured just by the types of weapons used, but as Ambassador has rightly suggested, the tons of possibilities and opportunities that we have lost for our current and future generations. Pakistan has been historically a well-documented thorn in the side of the hegemonic and expansionist ambitions of India. Under Modi mobocracy, those designs have touched the extremes of madness. The recent unilateral aggression against Pakistan in May, flouting international law, violating Pakistan's sovereignty, killing innocent civilians, demolishing homes, schools, and places of worship, and lowering the nuclear threshold had the potential to turn this entire region into a nuclear ashtray. As Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry rightly said and has mentioned in this book, Kashmir lies at the heart of this mistrust and acrimony, creating this proximity, breeding contempt and animosity rather than good neighborliness envisaged by Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Mahatma Gandhi, killed by RSS thugs. The takeaways of this book, I would say that stalemate, acrimony, confrontation, destabilization, proxy wars, and seesaw, up and down, now hope and now hopelessness, they kill the prospects of prosperous, peaceful future. I would say the peaceful future for both countries only lies, as Ambassador has rightly mentioned, in the framework based upon mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and not in the zero-sum games, violation of international law, and bad neighborliness. My message to our eastern neighbor, India, is hubris will not help India. Humility will. Thank you.
Thank you, Azaz Saab. When I came this morning, and met Azad Sahab, I said a spontaneous sentence I want to share with you. And I said, Azad Sahab, aapne to waqai achhi kitab likh di hai. Because the truth is that the number of books written by Pakistani former diplomats which are worthy of rereading is pretty thin. So, Azad Sahab, you are to be congratulated. I would have come anyway if your invitation had come to me out of friendship. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here out of admiration. Because Azad Sahab is probably, and I'll name names, the second book I will, after Riaz Muhammad Khan's book on Pakistan and Afghanistan, I think this book is worthy of going into the same shelf, in which what I'm grateful for, that he resisted the easy lure of chronology and went into the tough job of analysis. And actually, I can commend it to you. The book actually gets better as it goes on. And I think the chapters 7 and 8, the final two chapters, are the highlights of the book and worthy of rereading. Also, practically, Azad Sahab has exhausted the ideas, the prescriptions, the lot of proposals for peace, and one would be hard-pressed to find or think of a fresh idea because he has documented it thoroughly. I read it as sort of wearing multiple hats. I read it as I can only say, a former peacenik. That's how I was when I first came into Parliament back in 2008. I thought, in my naivete, that we were the first generation to discover peace and hope for peace, of which I was very speedily disillusioned. But that's that's the sort of the arc of one's thinking. And then, of course, I saw these Pakistan-India relations as a practitioner in government. And two or three conclusions, even especially after Banial al-Marsoos, but essentially beginning with 2016, when India went on its current phase of what someone has written of not war, not peace, of trying to punish Pakistan under the nuclear umbrella. They tried in 2016, then in again 2019, and now 2025. But we are now perilously close to shredding that umbrella. And I think it is something that we should all be alarmed about. It's something that is an indication for future researchers and writers in Azad Saab's book, because I am personally very alarmed. The logic of conflict is very near hazard level. And as has been commented, and I will repeat the comment, that the peace between two nuclear neighbors, Pakistan and Afghanistan, is dependent upon some misguided or violent individuals who can decide to act in India, and suddenly at least the larger power India is lobbing nuclear missiles at Pakistan. That's how the logic currently stands. It seems to have receded or faded after Banian al-Marsoos, but that's where things were left off. Particularly because this sense, and I think now the conclusion is very clear, as Asab writes it clearly in the book, is that conventional military conflict will not solve anything in South Asia. It's very clear, Pakistan and India in different times have fallen under this illusion, and now it's very clear. So what we are left with, ladies and gentlemen, is what India feels the last thing that succeeded were its missiles that penetrated Pakistan on May the 10th. And God forbid, if ever there is a conflict, that's where it will begin. It will not begin at a lower level. So we should be very alarmed, and as Asab speculates repeatedly about the Indian mindset, and very eloquently writes about it, and he said so in his remarks also. But the root of India's animosity, I think, has been written about at length. But as we stand in 2025 of India's gambit of what they called Operation Sindoor having failed, is, ladies and gentlemen, that India is a very large country, but it is yet to become a great country. Greatness requires an expansiveness of spirit and generosity that the state of India currently lacks. So what has happened, building upon what Solanki Saab said, India has developed hubris before it could develop the real strength of spirit. And that's what makes it stumble again and again. Like in 2019, in 2025, they were very confident that they could resolve this and put Pakistan in its place. Whatever deficiencies had been there in 2019, they thought they had fixed them with their Rafales and S-400s and Israeli drones. They thought, yes, now we could deliver a blow which will finally make Pakistan go down on its knees. But that didn't happen. But in its, there's a mythological beast called one-eyed Cyclops, which lashes out in anger. In its lashing out of anger, this time, the Indus Waters Treaty has been now put in abeyance, which is another trigger for war. We are actually still in the last few weeks of the monsoon season, which has, I hope, taught lessons to all of us, but also to India, that occasionally they will have to release water even in rivers that they thought they own. But once they have put the treaty in abeyance, there is another additional trigger point, which is that the division of the 6 rivers is now in question. And it will be for future policymakers in Pakistan and India to deal with this very thorny issue. But as we stand today, Pakistan, alhamdulillah, through the strength of the nation and its armed forces, has not been vanquished. That dream of vanquishing Pakistan lies in tatters. So, challenge before us, as I read the book and read the final concluding thoughts, is of course now a cliche, but a very difficult cliche to implement, which is how to strengthen our own country, our own economy, how we conduct our foreign affairs and domestic political affairs, and how we are able to marshal and use the elements of our national power into strengthening Pakistan. I have not mentioned Kashmir. I think people more qualified than I can speak more deeply on that subject. But the issue is that as we stand today, another conflict is on the cards. This is a difficult thing for me to say, but the logic of conflict says that there is going to be another conflict in a not too distant future. And how to avoid that conflict is our challenge. How to manage and use the changing global geopolitics to our advantage is our challenge. And the challenge is to what Pakistan has claimed and continues to claim, and inshallah will continue to claim, that we seek peace. And how to maintain that peace is going to be difficult. It has been said in a different manner, but I'll say it out openly as I see it. Peace requires more courage than war. And we have had moments when leaders had the courage, but then that courage foundered on the shoals of mistrust and hostility. But still, the requirement of courage from the leaders of Pakistan and India, more from India than Pakistan, is there. And only then, once, this is my formula, as I said, as a practitioner, that courage will be needed before we can even begin. Whatever prescriptions or thoughts or formulas, I think Izaz Sahab has written them very well in the book, and that's why the book is even more valuable than it initially seems to be, is that all the ideas have been discussed at length. So the only thing that remains, if we are to make progress, is courage by the leadership. Ambassador George Salim struck a poetic note when he quoted the poet Seamus Heaney from his poem The Cure at Troy. But the last two lines of this couplet or verse, I will end there. Heaney says, "So hope for a great sea change. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge." Ladies and gentlemen, this is our challenge for Pakistan and India, to finally, if we have the courage and our leaders have the courage, to walk to the far side of revenge and to give the hundreds and millions of poor on both sides of the border hope for a better life and peaceful coexistence. Thank you very much, Pakistan. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here for two reasons. One, this is a very auspicious occasion of this wonderful book launch, and secondly, I get to see wonderful friends back again. There are some memories that I share with the author, Azaz Chaudhry Saab, and I know him now for over a decade, and we came across working for the common purpose of defending the interests of this country. He was then the Foreign Secretary, and I was then at the GHQ, the Military Operations Directorate, and that is where we started to interact with each other. I absolutely knew that he was a wonderful diplomat, and he was a man who had everything about Pakistan at his heart, and but now I'm absolutely convinced that he is a great scholar as well. And thank you very much for giving me this book, which I received last week, and I went through it, and I'm absolutely convinced that I have had the opportunity, because since I've been in this business for a long time, I've had the opportunity to read many books, both several written by the Indians and by the authors from the West. Simply put, this was one of the best, most comprehensive, insightful, and a book which still leaves you with a lot of hope in a time of despair. And thank you for affording us this opportunity. That said, there are a few very important highlights that I drew out of this book. And that is the journey of India from 1922 to this day. It is a journey which started back then by V.D. Savarkar's Hindutva-based policy, which was rejected by many at that time. But now, it has taken a century for India to reach that unfortunate point where there is a Hindutva-based ideology which is pervasive in Indian political and social system. And unfortunately in central India and India which is north of Vindhyas, the India that controls the Indian strategic thought is reeking with this ideology. That is not, I'm not discounting some great people who still live there. There's some wonderful men and women who might still be thinking of living like good neighbors and in peace, but their voices, their ideas, their ability is completely depleted at this moment. They're not visible in Indian discourse. Qaid-e-Azam and some others realized that it would become very difficult for Muslims to find their rightful place in a majoritarian, Hindu majoritarian India. And hence the struggle which led to creation of the two dominions and one dominion in which we live, called Pakistan. And it was interesting to note that this experiment of dividing on communal basis was done in 1905 with Bengal for the first time, and there was a huge resistance which came from the Indian National Congress, and 6 years later that was reversed. In I think 1911 it was reversed, and again the same thing. And I get to share my feelings with you, which of course are also picked up from the writer. His concept of Akhand Bharat is not just RSS's concept. It is not M.S. Golwalkar's or Savarkar's or others' concept. It is a concept which has remained at the heart of the Indian leadership, maybe Mr. Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel and others, because they thought after the British leave, they will establish an India, a united India of their choosing. And that was quite evident that they were quite disturbed when Pakistan was coming into being. And three things were thrown at Pakistan right at the start. And that is not just the fractured past, that is the blood-soaked past. It was, when the two dominions came into being, it was literally converted into a partition, which it was not supposed to be. And it was completely blood-soaked. You can question that the blood spilt on that side was more or this side was more, but it was definitely blood-soaked. That was the first thing, that a huge lot of refugees, blood-soaked refugees, were thrown at Pakistan. Then was Kashmir. It was not Pakistan's doing, it was India's doing. And the first war began about a year after Pakistan's creation. And the idea was, there were talks, and I'm sure you guys know it, there were talks that Pakistan will fold under the weight of its own, it does not have any financial capacity, so it will fall under its own weight and will fall back into the Indian Union. Those were the ideas. And hence, the division of the assets. Assets were not given to Pakistan. Pakistan still survived. I'm saying this because those thoughts have never left them. There have been good people in there. They've been trying to see maybe India in a different light and see Pakistan in a different light. But at the core of their strategic thought process, this idea of a larger, bigger Akhand Bharat always stayed. And then the key question that it's not a question actually, now it is quite well known to people now. Is India really a hegemonic state? Its behavior with its neighbors, its deliberate efforts to fail a great concept, SARC. Now we don't even talk about it much. It was a great concept. And their deliberate efforts to fail that concept. All that leads to this clear understanding that India looks at itself in a different way. They don't look at SARC, they look at India. It is India, it is New Delhi which will shower some goodies or not, and SARC does not mean anything, and eventually it has really failed. Kashmir, it is central to the relationship between Pakistan and India. I am reminded of a conversation. Long time back, I was with your permission, sir, I was in Japan, and we were having a dinner hosted by the Japanese Chief of Army Staff. This was 2000, post the earthquake in 2005. We were there, and there was an Indian officer, and there was this Pakistani officer. We were there, and the Japanese army chief, he called both of us. We were on a dinner, and he said, what is the problem between the two countries? I was young. I said, there's basically one issue, main issue between the two countries, and it is Kashmir. And the Indian officer, I'm not going to name him, he rose to be a very senior officer, and he said, actually Kashmir is not an issue. And on that, the Japanese army chief made a very profound remark. He said the truth should not be hidden. It is an issue. It is a serious issue between the two countries. You can't run away from it. So it stays central to the problems between India and Pakistan. And India has chosen not to resolve it. My own understanding over a period of time, that starting from the UN resolutions to this day, they have done everything and anything to shy away from it, to shun it, and now they have started saying that there are material changes in the situation, so UN resolutions are no more relevant. And it is regardless of the dispensation that is there. There have been times when we thought that they're interested to resolve it, but at the core of it, no. Unfortunately, they believe, and I've been part of the track too. I'm still with Indians. We are still trying that some ways to peace must be crafted. Azhar Sahab, myself, we are together in that effort. But there is no way that they look at Kashmir from the perspective of resolving it. And one of the reasons that we found out, at least I found out, is that it actually defeats their concept of Akhand Bharat if it is resolved. We are not saying that it should be given to Pakistan, but it should be resolved in a manner that all four parties to the conflict, that is the Kashmiris at the heart of it, India, Pakistan, and the international community, agree with that kind of solution. They are not willing to go down that route. And I think that is one way or the other amply highlighted also. The story goes on, decades by decades. All diplomatic and political efforts have fallen short, and the narrative has been blame thy neighbor. That's the narrative that comes out from New Delhi, blame thy neighbor. But until the recent years, Modi's India has made it clear and the veil has fallen. No political and diplomatic effort will yield results of peaceful coexistence and good neighborly relations until there is a change of heart. And change of heart largely, because I still genuinely believe that peace-loving communities in Pakistan are much greater than they are in India, even today. It's not because of any weakness. I now believe that it is because of the large-heartedness of the Pakistanis. They're still much bigger. But until there's a change of heart in Indian political and social system, and India walks the path of dispute resolution genuinely and starts treating other neighbors as sovereign equals, it is going to be a very difficult situation. A lot has been said by Khurram Dastagir Saab. I tend to substantiate from my own thinking that if something is not done, if New Delhi, there is no change of heart in New Delhi and it walks the course that it is, another crisis is just around the corner, albeit with very dangerous consequences. And I hope the international community also understands this, because the kind of conflict that can happen between India and Pakistan will not remain only to this, the effects will not remain only to this part of the world. So it is a shared responsibility for everybody to have a very close look at how the situation is panning out at the moment. The writer says it all. I'm just trying to take some things out of it. The writer says it all. However, his yearnings for peace, like all of us, are also quite palpable. And however the situation, whatever the situation is, it may look very bleak at this moment, but the efforts must never cease for attaining lasting peace, for that is the ultimate goal, but not from a position of weakness, and not even from a position of strength, from a position of large-heartedness. I would recommend this book as an essential reading for young diplomats, civil servants, students and practitioners of national security and statecraft, and most certainly for the budding political leadership of our great country. In the end, I would once again like to thank Izaz Bhai for this great contribution. And although a lot has been written about India-Pakistan relations, a lot has been written about Kashmir, but this is one very, very comprehensive, insightful, and a very good addition to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Johar, for inviting me. My senior panelists have already talked about the content of the book, and very eloquently, I think they've given their perspective. Let me begin by just highlighting a few questions that the young people, especially on campuses, they come up with when we, especially in the field of peace and conflict studies, try to teach during our lectures the peace models that exist in the world today, and there are not many but few successful examples. They ask questions like why can't similar models be applied to Pakistan and India for peace in the region? How long hate and hostility will continue? And the most important one, whose fault is it? And we don't really have the answer. But then we need to come up with the answers, and even if those answers are very simple, because we can't afford to ignore these questions. And especially when we don't really have a choice. Do we have a choice other than desiring and working for peace? So the simple questions that these young people have in their mind, perhaps we need to change our lens and start thinking for simple answers. Instead of really looking into complicated, complex processes to resolve the issue in the region, why not just start focusing on very, very simple steps that people can take in order to establish peace. Now, what are those steps? I was thinking of first, talking about them in the end, but I think it's important after listening to all my seniors here. I think there is this peace constituency that exists virtually. Now that on the ground, given the nature of the problem that we face, and especially the government in India, it is difficult to directly engage and continue even the track to diplomacy or multi-track diplomacy, through multi-track diplomacy. There is this virtual world out there where young people, they're still trying to find answers to these questions, why we hate each other. And I'm not talking about the disinformation or the fake news or all those negative avenues that are being used to discredit each other, to find faults against each other. But there are people who are even innocent, but innocently trying to find solution. We need to invest in that. We need to identify and see if there are avenues where at least dialogue and discussion can continue to remove misunderstanding for the future generation. Because these people have not seen anything except that there are issues, problems, and then direct actions against each other and the wars. So if it's the generation that we have now, we are teaching them different level of education, providing them the degrees, and they are the ones who are going to take the responsibilities. These are the people who, when they opened their eyes, they found themselves in a situation where Pakistan was blamed, but not only blamed, but there was this war on terror going on. And since then, they have seen not just inside Pakistan, but outside Pakistan and all over there. So they are the people, they are the young people who have only seen violence in one form or other, whether it is domestic or outside. We need to really see how to take care of that generation, because they are the ones who are going to really take the responsibility. I spent my weekend reading the book, and I was pleasantly surprised that in the context of India and Pakistan, an ambassador who has actually worked and seen that much of the derailment, disillusionment, and all those efforts that were taken, turned into failure. And then, of course, the rise of aggressive neighbors who do not even seem to be interested in South Asian stability and security. Yet Ambassador Azaz is not letting the hope go away, and he has an optimistic view that sanity will prevail. The positive approach is present throughout the book with realistic perspective. It is written with the intention of getting to solution for the young Pakistanis and Indians and South Asians in general. The book presents, and I think this is how I see it, is a story of two neighbors who are, despite being geographically contiguous, they are now hermetically distant. And I was just wondering, the title, Pakistan-India Relations, A Fractured Past and Uncertain Future, what adjective you would have used if you had to add present in the title? Of course, the present is chaotic, dangerous, and it's all about trust deficit. Yet I think I found the answer in your words when you say that there is a fragile space exists that can lead to peace. So this is the present. Although it is fragile, but it is still there. There is some space. The book provides an in-depth analysis of India's strategic dilemma, of course, and especially after May confrontation, while asserting military strength for its domestic consumption, as well as its image of being a rising power, the risk of full-scale escalation due to its short-sighted emotionalization of foreign policy has undermined its broader objective of regional influence and global standing. Though there are some sane voices in India who have been indicating the consequences of such adventurism, it seems that the Modi government is still not fully grasping the flaws in its approach in dealing with the neighboring countries, especially with Pakistan. And the dichotomy in Indian policy is, while it asserts on bilateralism with Pakistan, but it invites the international community to intervene and support India's Pakistan bashing on terrorism issue. The book begins with a very comprehensive discussion on history of hostilities between the two countries, but I personally like chapter 5 and 6, which stands out as they take the reader to the broader spectrum of the issue. Given the change in security dynamics post 9/11, the change in Afghanistan and US-China competition, so it was not, the book is not exclusively only focusing on India or the behavior of the leadership in India or Pakistan, or a Pakistani's perspective of analyzing Indian behavior. It's much more broader in these two chapters, especially when we find how things have really changed. An important point highlighted in the book is the major change in Modi's behavior, of course, India's behavior as a nation, and a cold silence that you used the phrase on engaging with Pakistan, and on home front, the hostility towards Pakistan, making it a hot topic. And now that India is facing the dilemma, raising the public emotions so high through media, the extent that any shift in approach towards Pakistan would consider the political suicide, given the political calculation. Still, one must not lose hope. As the author keeps on reminding us in the book, politics is not static, and change does come. Time will tell if post-Modi, post-BJP, new government in India would continue with same aggressive behavior, it would apply a mature approach to its neighbor. The book concludes with a chapter on peace initiative, perceptions, and peaceful coexistence. And final chapter is a desire of a Pakistani who believes that good will prevail over bad, and there can be reversal of perpetual hostility. Now, academically speaking, in peace and conflict studies, we talk about conflict analysis process. And I think somewhere somebody talked about the prescription and the diagnosis. So it is like an assessment-based prescription to identify the disease before the treatment. In case of Pakistan and India conflict, multiple treatments were prescribed in the form of bilateral talks, composite dialogue, CBMs, people-to-people interact to, but never had a smooth conflict resolution process because of lack of agreement on the diagnosis of the problem. No negotiations can succeed if the parties to the conflict have different diagnosis of the problem. The major obstacle to peace between India and Pakistan is the absence of mutual understanding of core issue. Therefore, a genuine conflict analysis by the parties to the conflict is the key to initiate a sustainable conflict resolution process. The unique aspect of the book is that it makes reader question the existing political dynamics in South Asia. It is not a narration, not an opinion-based document only, but also I think it's carefully applied critical thinking approach to debunk some myths and reject assumptions. And I think it is one of the first few books that has a chapter on May 25 confrontation. it is important to bring this in academic discourse. Major takeaway is that it is time to change the lens from state-centric to people-centric. India needs to move from, as Ambassador Saab has mentioned in his book also, rehumanizing, moving from dehumanizing to rehumanizing the relations with neighbor. The cost of being in the conflict is too high. Peaceful coexistence is the key. India cannot achieve its global aspiration when the region where it geographically exists or situates is unstable and insecure. I think one aspect, as I already talked about, is in your next edition, if you could talk about the digital generation. So the young people who have a different, totally different understanding of the history of the conflict or the countries. I mean, they do understand, they are influenced by the propaganda, of course, in India, and I'm talking about Indian youth, but then there is this ambiguity. So this ambiguity in the young minds, I think there is a space to touch that, to engage them, and not to let the young Indians who are just growing up, the teenagers, consumed by the hatred or the agenda that is there for coming years. I congratulate Ambassador Azaz Chaudhary for this timely book, and I will definitely recommend this to my student in order to understand what is going on in the region. And it's not just for the peace and conflict studies or IR students, but I think it is important for other students also in the social sciences who can benefit. Thank you.
General Amir Sahib, Professor Arshi Salim Hashmi, Ambassador Johar Salim, esteemed participants, it is my distinct honor and privilege being here today at this book launch, and think a great endeavor by Ambassador Azaz Chaudhary, and he's not only an esteemed diplomat, but we've seen in the recent Indo-Pak conflict, he proved to be a great spokesperson for Pakistan, a great ambassador for Pakistan, and he really helped us build a strong narrative in this Indo-Pak conflict. So I think kudos to you, sir. We really owe you a debt of gratitude, and we are really grateful for your service to Pakistan, and not only during your service, but even after your service, the service to Pakistan, which still continues. A great patriot, and my compliments on this book launch, and we really wish you all the best. With regard to the Indo-Pak relations, the past, the present, and the future, I think first of all, there has to be a realization of the two-nation theory. And we must admit that the two-nation theory was never really accepted. And right after the creation of Pakistan, India tried establishing its military dominance over Pakistan. Pakistan has never been the aggressor. Pakistan has always defended its frontiers. The armed forces of Pakistan have always played a great role in defending the motherland. We just celebrated our Defense Day a couple of days back, which reminds us of the time when India tried to establish its hegemony, not only over Pakistan, but in the region. And at that point in time, the whole nation came together, and our armed forces valiantly not only countered the attack of the enemy, but also defended the motherland with great valor and bravery. We've seen diplomatic efforts of the past, but these diplomatic efforts can only succeed once disputes are recognized as disputes. Kashmir being the biggest dispute between India and Pakistan, as long as the people the indigenous people of Jammu and Kashmir continue to suffer, there can be no peace. Because not only is the two-nation theory questioned by the present government in India, but the rise of the Hindutva ideology has also made life very difficult for minorities. And this so-called claim of being one of the biggest democracies has really failed. And with every passing day, we see that they've now gone towards transnational regression, towards transnational assassinations, like the distinct case of Hardeep Singh Najjar in Canada, and in other countries for that matter. So, this so-called hegemony in the region, and I think in the recent Indo-Pak conflict, the false notion of rising India, this false glorification of being an economic and military power, I think that premise fell flat on its face when they were confronted with Pakistan. And Alhamdulillah, we not only established our military might with a response, with a befitting response, but I think our diplomatic efforts, we also displayed exemplary diplomacy, superior diplomacy. And with regard to war of the narratives, I think their arrogance got the better of them. And when we went on international fora, when we took to the international media, I think we were able to advocate our case much better than our adversaries. And there's a reason. Because the power of truth cannot be subdued. The power of truth cannot be conquered. And when we say that Pakistan has given great sacrifices in this war against terrorism, we really mean it. When one Pakistani soldier, one Pakistani officer, one Pakistani citizen, or even children for that matter, we're a country where children have laid down their lives in this war. So when one Pakistani lays down his or her life in this war against terrorism, it is to make Pakistan safe, but more importantly, to make the world a safer place. So Pakistan is like a shield, a wall between the terrorists and the rest of the world. And the false flag operation of Pahalgam had very shaky foundations. To level allegations against Pakistan of sponsoring terrorism, I think it's as absurd as it gets. How can a country which has suffered economic losses to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, how can a country which has laid down more than 90,000 lives sponsor terrorism when it's the biggest victim of terrorism? And as I mentioned, the transnational regression, the transnational assassinations taking place on the behest of the Indian state actually prove the point that they are trying to suppress the minorities, whereas Pakistan has always been desirous of peace. And even in this recent conflict, an unprovoked, unjustified attack by the enemy, which was given a befitting response, and that attack was on a false premise of trying to play the victim card. So when we see capture of spies like Kulbhushan Yadav, when we see cases in international courts where Pakistan, alhamdulillah, gets vindicated, our point is proven further that Pakistan wants peace, Pakistan speaks for justice, Pakistan speaks for fair play. Another bone of contention, which has recently again been used as a means of aggression, as a tool, has been water. the violation of the Indus Water Treaty, a failed attempt at unilaterally revoking this treaty, which is legally not possible. So the International Court of Arbitration, other international forums have very clearly stated that a treaty to which two parties consent cannot be unilaterally rescinded or revoked. It's as clear as that. So I think as long as there is a rise of Hindutva and the far right wing imposes policies of its own liking and does not recognize international disputes as disputes, there will always be a bone to pick. But I must also acknowledge that when we've been faced with testing times, whenever an attempt has been made to pose an existential threat, the whole nation has come together, be it the youth of our country, be it the intelligentsia, the academia, the media, politicians, civil society alike. And the whole nation has stood rock solid behind its armed forces, a force to be reckoned with. And how do you defeat a country which is united, which is standing behind its armed forces, and which is narrating nothing but the truth? So I think as far as water is concerned, Pakistan established its case very well. As far as being a victim of terrorism is concerned, Pakistan successfully laid down its narrative. And I think with regard to Jammu and Kashmir, we will be going to the United Nations General Assembly later this month, and the Prime Minister will be presenting Pakistan's case. And Pakistan has always made it a point to raise its voice against the oppression that is being faced by the indigenous and innocent people of Jammu and Kashmir. So I think the two-nation theory has never been this strong before as it is now. And Pakistan continues to tread the path of peace. But we've established that if an enemy tries to impose its will or tries to establish its military dominance, it will, inshallah ta'ala, always miserably fail on this front, because Pakistan stands united, Pakistan stands tall, and Pakistan stands with truth and peace. I again pay my gratitude to you, sir, my compliments on this launch. We hope to learn more from you and from this endeavor, and we hope that you continue to serve Pakistan as you always have in the past. Thank you very much, Pakistan Zindabad.
To formally conclude today's ceremony, I would now like to request Dr. Qamar Cheema, who is the Executive Director of the Snowbird Institute, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much for honoring us, everyone here. First of all, I would like to thank the Information Minister for his leadership. During this recent India-Pakistan conflict, we have seen the way you led either at the domestic media, international media, or at the social media domain. Your presence was remarkable, and we could make our point globally, even we didn't have much of the English media at that time. Secondly, thank you very much, Ambassador Johar Salim, for partnership with the Snowbird Institute and the way you have been sort of an invigorating syrup for the Institute of Regionals IRS. That is remarkable. We find that it's making a lot of presence in the strategic community. And thank you very much, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry. Many of you don't know, when I, along with Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, were working to establish Snowbird Institute, he told me that I have been the Foreign Secretary and I have headed the Institute of Strategic Studies. And now I want to make a platform where I can pay back to my community. So Snowbird Institute is about paying back to the community for all his time he has devoted and he has given. So starting from the strategy manifesto Snowbird Institute wrote, and then we also worked on the tourism potential in Pakistan along with the Serena hotels. And now the Grassroots Governance Conference we are doing next month with the Beacon House University, and many other projects we have done. Everything has been said regarding the book, but the 3 points I would like to make on that. The first thing is, the Indian political class wants to leave a legacy, and unfortunately that legacy is legacy of hate, division, strategic anxiety. Normally when politicians come as a prime minister third time, they want to give an impression that they want to gel people, they want to connect people, but unfortunately we have not seen this point where the region is connected or gelled. And we can see that legacy, that the legacies of hate and that legacy of division, and you can see that how this has gone deep-rooted into the Indian community. Despite the fact that Pakistan has given many times offers for talks, engagement, even recently Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister openly said that we want to engage with India, including Kashmir. The second point which I want to make is, which is also very significant, that normally the political class link development with the electoral politics. But unfortunately, in India we have seen the political class has linked foreign policy and national security with the electoral politics. So war is necessary, war is imminent, aggression is to be there. So you just cannot ignore that there will not be a war. Prime Minister Modi cannot afford not to have an aggression. He cannot afford not to have a war with Pakistan, because that gives him a sort of a political legitimacy at home, that gives him a lot of support to come back as a prime minister. The third and the last point which I want to make here is that definitely is that we need a third party, and third party's role is necessary for peace and stability in South Asia. And I think that's where the international community, and particularly we have seen the role of the President of the United States, that was very eminent and important. And I think India must accept that role of a third party so that we can have a stable South Asia. Thank you all for honoring us at this moment. I'm the last man standing behind, between you and lunch. So we have had food for thought. Now we should have food for stomach.
Thank you very much.